Thank you very much for coming to this press conference. Today we are finishing off 2 very intense days of meetings with European Union ministers who are responsible for telecommunications and digital issues. This is something being held under the Spanish presidency, where we are addressing issues which are fundamental for our presidency and for the future of Europe. We've been dealing with digital rights, the future of telecommunications, artificial intelligence, how we can push forward these new technologies while guaranteeing privacy, our security, our rights and democratic values. In the final session this morning, we're going to be talking about new technologies which can be used to achieve the goals of the digital decade. I think that our meeting today finished with a general consensus about the roadmap that we need to continue to follow to make sure that the European Union continues to be an international leader in telecommunications. This is something that has contributed to Europe's prosperity in past decades. The European Union, we have agreed, needs to be a pioneer in new technologies. And in our meetings, it clearly emerged that all member states support our desire to boost innovation, have secure infrastructure, give an impetus to new technologies, whilst protecting our democratic values and our strategic autonomy. That's extremely important in the current international context. Although this was an informal meeting of ministers, we have made some practical progress. The first European declaration to encourage investment and public-private partnership in developing neurotechnologies. As I have said, this is a landmark. Spain is the first European country which has set up its own national center for neurotechnologies in Madrid. And there we have an investment of 120 million euros, which will be used to support research, cooperation networks, and drive forward neurotechnologies. In our meetings this morning, we talked about the future of telecommunications. We are going through an unprecedented technological revolution. We need to make sure that we have the appropriate regulatory framework for that, definitely in these very difficult geopolitical times. Connectivity is the backbone of a modern economy. It also clearly emerged, and I'm sure Commissioner Breton will tell you a bit more about this, that there's a desire to continue improving secure and resilient infrastructure for our continent. That includes broadband networks, making sure that we have 100% broadband coverage, deployment and improvement of 5G, cooperation between public and private partners, and ensuring that we have the necessary investment in our continent. We've also said how important it is to set up joint teams at a European level to deal with cyber attacks. This is a particularly interesting area for León, where there is the National Institute for Cybersecurity in CIBE. This is a European and global leader in cybersecurity. We here will be working towards dealing with these challenges for the future and ensuring this technology, which is key for our citizens. In the Spanish presidency, we have been focusing on digitalization. We want Europe to continue to be a leader in this global effort while protecting our fundamental European rights, non-discrimination, privacy, and security of data, whilst protecting the most vulnerable consumers, and particularly children. I think I can say, having listened to my fellow ministers that under the Spanish presidency, we have pushed forward many and made progress on many of the most important files. After this meeting, Commissioner Breton will be returning with Secretary of State Artigas for a new round of negotiations with the European Parliament with a view to completing the Artificial Intelligence Act under the Spanish presidency. We are also moving forward with the European Identity Act, EIDAS, the Cyber Resilience and Cyber Solidarity Act, which we mentioned in our meeting, the Gigabyte Infrastructure Act. This was another aspect that we talked about. Spain is fully committed to making progress with the digital convergence of our continent to make sure that this is completely compatible with protecting our rights and fundamental values, making sure that we have that technological progress, but that data is safe and that our children are safe online. I'd like to finish by thanking all of the teams who have been involved in organizing the meetings here in León. I'd like to thank the Economics Ministry for digital transformation. I'd like to thank the Commissioner and all the member states. I'd like to thank the government departments in CIBE, the Ministry of the Interior, which has then provided all of these security services for our meeting so that we could have a meeting in a completely normal way. I'd like to thank the media and the interpreters who've been helping us the whole day. And I'd like to thank the citizens of León from the bottom of my heart. They have really thrown themselves into this meeting. They knew that this was a unique opportunity. And over these 2 days, they have shown all of their affection and all of their warmth, despite the cool temperatures. That has really improved our experience and has shown the leadership that our country has in telecommunications. Now I'd like to hand over to Commissioner Thierry Breton.
Thank you very much, Deputy Prime Minister. And it's my turn now to warmly thank you personally for all of the efforts that you have made to make these 2 days a success for communication, for digital, and for Europe. Thank you also to you for having organized this. As you said, it's an exceptional moment, and it really is something quite unforgettable for us. During these 2 days, as the Deputy Prime Minister said, yesterday we had a debate about protecting fundamental rights in the digital era, and today we focused more on the question of what infrastructure we deploy in Europe to maintain our competitiveness when we talk about telecoms, but also the whole infosphere. And there's the Commission's proposal, of course, to put forward a white paper on this subject, and then also a legislative act, which we're currently calling the Digital Network Act, for want of a better term, but I'll come back to that later. So, on the first point, just some extra bits of information to build on what was said by the Deputy Prime Minister. We do, of course, have an important package of a regulatory framework to protect our citizens' digital rights. There's the Charter of Fundamental Rights, of course. There's the GDPR, the Data Protection Regulation. There's the data law. There's also the EU Declaration on Digital Rights and Principle for the Digital Decade. And there's the DSA as well, the Digital Services Act. And the Artificial Intelligence Act is, well, a trialogue will be taking place on that later today, so I'll be taking part in that as well. And one point on the DSA, as you know, it's really fundamental these days to ensure the protection and security and safety of our digital sphere. Now, we talked about moving from principles to action, and as you know, we are in direct communication with the 19 largest platforms who will be governed by the DSA. You have also followed what the Commission has done in recent days after the horrific and tragic events which took place in Israel, the terrible act of terrorism perpetrated by Hamas. And in that context, we are in permanent daily contact with the large platforms to make sure that they respect the commitments that they have made when they, which is a precondition for them operating in our territories. And we have made a number of formal requests for information from certain of these platforms as well. We've also had a discussion about the digital decade. Now, that really is our compass, if you like. It's our objective, and it's what we've decided to do together to make sure we have the right infrastructure in Europe so that we can support this information space and help us meet our digital goals, where Industry 4.0, Web 4.0, and so on. Now, of course, in some areas we're doing well, in others we're a little bit behind, and that's why we're building on what we discussed in the telecoms conference in Council in Luxembourg. And I'm pleased we had an opportunity to have such a rich discussion today. And I think everybody has well understood, and it was very satisfying for me to see that, everybody's understood around the table that this isn't just a temporary issue, like the fair share question. This is more about really looking to the future and seeing how we can define together what our common vision is that we will need for our continent, for all 27 member states. What technology will we need? What financing will we need? We've all understood we'll need major financing for these new projects, and what regulation will we need as well? We decided to do what we normally do, namely to have a very broad consultation to start with, and that will take a number of weeks, and that will lead us to the first publication of conclusions. Now, we have consulted on with all of the stakeholders, all member states, of course, but also telecommunication operators, platforms, ONGs, everyone who wishes to have their say. That was the idea of the consultation, and then we aggregate that and draw our initial conclusions, and that will then be fed into the Commission's work programme. And that the idea is to put together a white paper, as we call it in Commission parlance, and then the second phase is opening here in León. We decided to put our heads together over the next 3-4 months and think about how we can really fine-tune our shared vision. I think we already have quite clear ideas, but we need to refine our positions, taking account of what was said around the table. And perhaps now it's time to build the architecture, as we did with the chips, or has been done with the Chips Act, where a need was identified. We had the 3 pillars: technology, finance, and regulatory, and we used those pillars to develop a text, the Chips Act, which has led to 100 billion euros of investment, mostly private funding, but we raised visibility on this need. And so today, again, 3 pillars: the technology pillar, defining the networks of the future. They're no longer going to be copper networks, are they? Our current networks date from the start of this century, and the legacy networks and operators need to open up the networks, or needed to open up the networks to allow other operators to come along. But copper is now disappearing, of course, and we now have so-called software-defined networks too, networks which are much more virtual in nature, and we're going to have artificial intelligence, edge computing, satellite networks, and so on. And we need to properly define all of this. And then, of course, figures need to be attached, and that's the second pillar. How can we put a figure next to all of these investments? We know that they're going to be major, and of course, we need to allow the world of finance to regain its appetite to invest in telecoms. Now, we really need to very quickly correct this tendency where there isn't that much private investment in this area. And the third area is any regulatory problems there might be, trying to remedy those. So we discussed as well, I don't want to take too much time because the Vice President has mentioned the question of making our infrastructure more secure. Operating a network is also a security operation these days as well. Given the way the world is at the moment and hybrid attacks, we need to make sure that our networks are secure, physically and virtually as well. We've seen certain attacks taking place, and we need to draw the consequences of those. I'm not just talking about undersea cables, but they're important. Of course, there's the question of the Cyber Solidarity Act as well, and cybersecurity, and this will allow us to build a cyber shield to protect ourselves and our citizens. And of course, there's also the question of how we use our networks and how we secure infrastructure that makes up the network. So that's a whole package, really, and we need to think of it all and put it all into our white paper. It won't be finished under the Spanish presidency, but certainly under the Belgian presidency. We had the minister with us, Vice Prime Minister Pedro de Soto, who invited us to Belgium for a special event as well, which will take place when the Commission tables its white paper. So that really gives me an objective and a time frame as well for this next phase, which will end with which will lead us to the Digital Network Act as its final objective. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we can have question sessions. If you can, first of all, say your name and which publication you're representing.
Yes. Hello, I'm Mathieu Boet from Politico. I understand you both calling for an update of the competition policy and stronger pan-European operators. What do you say to operators that say that cross-border measures are not the solutions, as opposed to in-market consolidation? So do we need to relax these rules as well? And maybe one for you, Commissioner, about the roundtable with the financing sector that you talked about with EU ministers, as I understand. Thank you.
Well, actually, since I am here representing the presidency, I think that it's fair to say we have exchanged views, but there was no sort of a unanimous view on how to proceed in this area. What I described in my introductory remarks was the unanimous view on a roadmap and the priorities to ensure that we continue to be in the lead in terms of the infrastructures and the technologies which are the backbone of a modern economy. And so I understand from Commissioner's, from his remarks, that after the public consultation, there will be a white paper that will integrate and will be intensively exchanged with the member states with a view to steering the process and the next steps. That's my understanding, and therefore, you know, as presidency, I can only say that I think the discussions today have been extremely productive, so that we have been able to listen to all member states and get a very clear view of what their priorities are and what their views are on the different issues at stake, and that there is a broad consensus on the need to continue to work together, cooperate, deepen our cooperation, and invest and have the appropriate regulatory framework to keep the leadership of Europe in these new technologies.
So maybe I will add a few comments, if you allow me. First, I understand your question, but if I may say so, it's like a few months ago when, it was not you, but your colleague asked me, yes, but what about fair share? So now, yes, what about in member states consolidation? I understand your question and I respect it, but it's not the purpose. I know it could be the question of some of our stakeholders. Our purpose is much broader than that. We need to share a common vision. And this is exactly what we started to engage in Luxembourg, and that we have been consolidated now. Everybody around the table agreed on the necessity to work on this vision. And of course, this vision is extremely important for us in order to know, to define what are the networks of tomorrow. And then when you think about it, what should be the financing? How could we attract again investors in network? But in order to do this, you need to offer to the investors a vision and also a legal framework towards this vision. This is exactly what we are building now. We cannot afford to have only investors now to decide to invest in the US or elsewhere, and not anymore in Europe, because we don't have this vision. This is exactly what we want to build together. And then, of course, in the third pillar, we will propose what we believe will be appropriate in order to cope with the need of investor and to find the right, quote-unquote, business model, return of investment, return of equity, and also to continue to protect the interest of our consumers. So this is the both track that we are pushing and following. And now regarding your question, specific question to investors, I think it's extremely important that we explain also to the financial community what we are doing, because of course we believe that with what we will propose and we want to achieve, it will be a good framework from then to start to think how to reinvest again in Europe. So we want just to prepare them to this exercise, and also to have them on board. They're stakeholders. At the end of the day, a financial institution which is willing to invest in a digital infrastructure is a stakeholder per se. So we want then to have them also a dedicated track to listen to them and to listen also what is needed for them to invest, because believe me, we know that we will need a significant amount of money to achieve our ambition, and we will achieve it.
Any more questions? ¿Hay más preguntas? Sí, por allí.
Buenos días, señora ministra. Es para usted son.
Good morning, Deputy Prime Minister. I have two questions about national politics. First of all, if you could give me an assessment on the government's agreement today with the party Sumar, and whether this is going to then reduce the length of the working day. Thank you very much. I'm going to give you a very brief answer, because I think that very shortly this agreement made by the government is going to be presented, and so I will wait until that is made. Good morning.
Televisión Española.
From Spanish television. In the next few days, the government will be taking stock of its achievements. I would like to know whether you're going to be making any announcements about taxes and what's going to be happening in the coming year. Well, this is something that I will refer back to the government when it announces its agreement. Good morning. Oscar González, Cadena Ser. Here we're in a part of the country where there's been an emphasis on neurotechnologies, 5G, artificial intelligence. There are many areas in Spain where these technologies haven't reached them yet. And there are lots of black spots on the map. 15% of the territory of Spain has problems with connectivity, especially in rural areas. What plans does the ministry have to improve the situation? And what would you then say to citizens in those areas to make sure that there aren't second and third class connective citizens? Thank you. Well, it's extremely important for us that in every corner of our country we have the digital economy so that young people can stay in their area and that they can properly thrive and make the most of these new technologies. In the last 5 years, we have brought down the digital divide by half for broadband and high-speed internet in cities and in the countryside. We are going to be using European funding to make sure that we can cover nearly all of the areas in Spain. And in places where we can't have cabled broadband, where we don't have fiber, what we've been doing since June is deploying a new satellite system in remote and scarcely populated areas in our country, in areas like León, where there are lots of people living and where there are there's lots of economic activity. We are going to have a flat rate of 35 euros a month for high-speed internet. Spain is a pioneering country in Europe to close that digital divide between the cities and the countryside, and we want to make sure that that connectivity reaches every nook and cranny of our country. This is what we're doing also with our new technologies. We've just started a new program to help 5G deployment in places where less than 1,000 people live. This is something that's just going to be present in the big cities, Madrid and Barcelona, but we want to make sure that we have 5G across the country. It's essential for digitalization. It's essential for what we do in our lives and for our economy. We are deploying this aid and assistance not just in the big cities, but throughout Spain to make sure that people have access to 5G, especially in scarcely populated areas. People need to be able to make the most of the new digital economy.
Perhaps I could just add a point as well. Let me just add something, because while there is still one household that is not connected, we cannot be satisfied. That goes for Spain and the rest of Europe. But let me also give you Europe's vision here. Spain is one of the countries which is progressing the best in this area, and I'm saying this not because they are making very good progress that we should be happy that there are one or two households still not covered. I can tell you that Spain is progressing the best and one of the best countries in Europe, and is very, very dynamic, in fact going the fastest, I think, and really getting rid of these coverage black spots. Now, of course, we can't cover everywhere in the whole of Europe by fiber, and that's why in Europe we have proposed a new type of infrastructure, satellite-based infrastructure that we call Iris Square, and that will be a multi-orbit. It'll have low, medium, and possibly also geostationary orbit satellites, which will allow us to cover the whole of Europe's territory, so that those zones which are difficult to access, they might be in mountainous areas or areas which are arid, or areas in the north of Europe which are very difficult to reach as well. So those areas too can also have access, and that is also something that goes hand in hand with what the member states are developing themselves. And we will be calling on member states and trying to help them to cover all of their national territories, and that really is one of the objectives of the digital decade, namely that between now and 2030 we can grant access to everyone and no one will be left behind.
Sí, buenos días. Antonio Lorenzo del periódico El Economista. Por una parte, una pregunta.
I have a question to Commissioner Breton. Today, then, we heard that a leading group here in Spain is hoping that there will be more decisions made on mobile connectivity by the end of the year. I'd like to know a bit more about those deadlines and whether that will be met. Then to the Deputy Prime Minister, we've heard a lot about the equal treatment of technological operators from a tax and legislative point of view. We've heard a bit about the Commissioner on that, but I'm just wondering what's going to happen with the investment in deployment of networks.
Well,
on fair share, as I've said, this really is something which should be seen in a more overarching vision, as I mentioned earlier. Now, when it comes to the reflection and the white paper, we will, of course, be asking ourselves all of the right questions, including the right amount of payment or remuneration for the use of these networks. It's one of the aspects, but it's not the be-all and end-all of this objective. We're trying to take a vertical approach, really, I think, and that's the only way, I think, for us to find solutions, I think. Now, on the first question, that's not something that I can answer. It would be my colleague Didier Reinders in the Commission who would be the one to answer who's responsible for that. I'm not sure he would really answer either, because as you know, there's an investigation underway. And certainly, so I can't really give you an answer there.
As the Commissioner has pointed out, indeed, no practical decision was taken at today's meeting. It was an informal meeting of ministers, so we exchanged points of view in terms of remuneration and financing of infrastructure. That's something that will be addressed in the white paper from the Commission. That it will be presented during the Belgian presidency, and then it will give all of the various stakeholders and actors information so that they can be involved in this dialogue in order to then strengthen our digital infrastructure. This is then essential for our digital economy and for prosperity in Europe.
Soy Belén Molleda de la agencia EFE, ahondando un poco en la...
If I could pick up on my fellow journalist colleague, I'd like to ask the Commissioner, what do you think about these big companies like Netflix paying for the network? Is that something that you are considering? Is it something that's going to be discussed in detail, and how do you see this going forward?
I think I already answered this question, and I cannot tell more. We wait for the white book, and you will see what we will propose.
Javier Rivas de Europa Press. En relación a las neurotecnologías.
On neurotechnologies, I'd like to know whether you have then set any investment targets for the coming years. On Friday, the data for GDP is going to be published, and I'd like to know what we can expect for Spain. Then a question to the Deputy Prime Minister about being a candidate for the European Investment Bank. I'm wondering whether this is going to then be subject to, well, this is going to be conditioned by an approach on fiscal rules. Then on the plan for Telefonica, I was wondering what you think there about the retirement plan. On the Neurotechnologies Declaration, this is a pioneering text because we are pointing out how necessary it is at European level to invest in this area so that it can develop and innovate. We're also calling on the European Commission to start a process of dialogue with an expert group so that this work can be taken forward. We want to make sure that these technologies are promoted while fully respecting our individual rights. This is an issue that Spain has been promoting over recent years. As I've said, we have set up our own neurotechnology center in Madrid, and there are very few of those centers around the world. We have an extremely ambitious program where we don't just want to invest, but we want to attract international talent. We want to get back to Spain some of the best experts around the world who came from Spain and are now working in American universities. We want to be at the cutting edge of this new technological area. In the declaration, though, we haven't set any fixed goals, but as I said, in Spain, we have invested 120 million euros to set up this center within the Autonomous University of Madrid. On the GDP figures, we'll have to wait and see. I don't want to anticipate events. However, we have seen that in 2020 and 2021, the Spanish economy really recovered. It showed that it's strong and resilient in a very complicated international context. In 2023, the Spanish economy is still strong in terms of employment and investment. We then are expecting to have about 2.4% growth by the end of the year, and we're expecting GDP to stay at 2%, plus 2% for next year. So that really keeps us above average in the Eurozone. In terms of the European Investment Bank, we have a strong, our strong candidates, and the support of other member states has nothing to do with negotiations that have been taking place under the Spanish presidency, and it has absolutely nothing to do with the discussions on the new tax rules. In Spain, we are constantly working at all levels with the large member states and with all member states to try and prepare an initial regulatory text which we'll be presenting to the ECOFIN on the 9th of November. We want to show our leadership as the Spanish presidency, and it has nothing else to do with these other issues, which are completely separate. Finally, I'd like to comment on a specific event, and that is the way that we see Telefónica. Telefónica is a strategic company. It's one of the most important in our country, and we want to make sure that all of these strategic operators are strengthened, that they have the right investment to have the very best infrastructure, which is strong, resilient, and secure. That is really the backbone of a modern economy. Thank you very much. I'm afraid we have to stop the press conference now. I don't know whether the Commissioner would like to say anything further.
Just let me say thank you once again to the Spanish presidency for these 2 unforgettable days in León. A few weeks ago we were in Toledo, now we're in León. Next week it'll be the Canary Islands. For some of us, we're seeing again or discovering the wonderful geography and landscapes of your country. So thank you very much to you.